Welcome to Read and Think. This is where a book that I'm reading, certain phrases catch my eye and make me think, and I'm sharing with you. First up, Thomas Sowell in his Cultures and Conquests book. Germanic tribes settled in what is now England in a number of ways. Some were immigrant settlers during Roman times. Some were invited in during the 5th century AD as military allies to help repel attacks from other British tribes, the Picts and the Scots, ancestors respectively of today's Scots and Irish. In the centuries that followed, still more Germanic invaders arrived, pushing many of the original Britons westward toward what is now Wales, and subjugating or annihilating those who remained. These Germanic conquests were neither as swift nor as coordinated as those of the Romans had been. Various tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, for example, independently conquered different areas, and there were periods of territorial stability before new expansions of these conquests began. People don't seem to realize that, of course, language itself, the English language, has strong Germanic roots. Indeed, I believe most people would identify it as a Germanic language, at least most linguists, I should say, although at least 30% of its words also have a great French influence, as we will see coming up. And what's interesting is that these cultural mixes and this volatility of tribal invasions continually turning over the culture over and over and over and over to where there was high adaptability. Who are the new invaders and what are we going to do with them, and how do we adapt and survive? And that might have been something that has a cultural element built into it, that human beings get used to this kind of adaptability. And I think that's a fascinating part of culture. As the central governmental structure of the Romans collapsed into fragmented local powers, Britain struggled to maintain some semblance of Roman culture as they retreated before the invading Germanic peoples. Many of these Romanized Britons fled to France, to what is now called Brittany. In Britain itself, Christianity, Latin scholarship, and the remnants of Roman civilization in general survived among those Britons who retreated westward and northward before the Germanic invaders. One of these Britons, St. Patrick, has been credited with transplanting this Christian civilization to Ireland. As of the end of the 6th century AD, the emerging English was a backwater of Western civilization, an enclave of illiterate pagans in Christianized Western Europe. Markets disappeared and population declined. So the Romans retreated back into the empire and Germanic invaders took their place. And of course, these Germanic invaders, a number of different kinds of tribes had different rules, and their ferocity pushed back the native Britons who were adapted to Roman ways into another era of both chaos and instability. It's no surprise that the markets disappeared. They probably got raided, and the population, of course, was less inclined to actually flourish in an era here of chaos and instability. I have to wonder about our population declining in the Western world and throughout the world in industrial nations. Is there something similar going on here where there's certain amounts of chaos, uncertainty, high cost, and everything else to where the population declines? We're certainly seeing that, and I'm just wondering what kind of parallel one can draw between this particular reading here and change in the present era. The market agriculture of Roman times gave way to smaller farms and subsistence farming. Imitations of Roman mass-produced goods began to be crudely handmade. The use of coins declined. Pottery ceased to be mass-produced. Roads and waterways fell into disrepair. Central heating and hot baths disappeared for many centuries. So did bricks, which the Romans used, but which did not reappear in Britain until the 14th century, when they were imported from the continent. The term retrogression should now take on pretty specific and disastrous meaning. So you went from very strong farming techniques to subsistence farming, where people barely could have enough to eat. That means a declining population, a certain vitality that's lost. The fact that there were coins that no longer came into use meant that there was no centralized manner of trade. Everything was reduced to barter. If roadways and waterways fell into disrepair, then the easy transport of goods from by cart or better by boat, because transporting by water is much cheaper, easier, and you're less inclined to get robbed on the water, I think, in a lot of ways. But the fact that we could see that so much of the Roman retrogression when the Romans left, really had a disastrous effect on the entire population. Bricks, for example, is something I think we take for granted these days, but they had to be manufactured and at not only great expense, but in a huge capacity if you wanted to build anything. And the fact that it took centuries for these to reappear, imported from the continent, not made in Britain, is a rather dire prediction of what happened for the next so many centuries, for 8 centuries, I think. So you could see that retrogression, when applied back to the Roman times against the Britons and the Germanic invasions, and think about it to the present day, when there has been a conqueror who's left in the last couple 100 years from a country, then what happened to that country? Did they have a retrogression themselves in some way, linguistically, culturally, militarily, in an industrial manner, in a trade manner? It's a worthwhile question to consider. Glass bottles, which had been produced in Roman times, disappeared from England and did not reappear until Elizabethan times, when bottles began to be imported from Venice, and it was the 17th century before glassblowing was re-established in the British Isles. This is a rather stunning indictment of retrogression at the loss of the Romans. Technology like glass bottles, which could preserve various foodstuffs, oils, medicines, and various other items, and would not be absorbed in, let's say, a clay pot, really contributed, I bet, mightily to health issues and other diseases that might have occurred there. At least what I'm thinking is that this sense of loss for basically 1,000 years is indicative of how a particular culture, when it vacates an area that it's conquered, has severe retrogression. And so that's a fascinating part to consider as we look through the book here.